What happens when the greatest threat isn't the war you're fighting, but the island you're stranded on? An island that doesn't exist on any map, a place whispered about only in local legends. They call the creature that lives there the Orang Ikan, a sea demon whose cruelty is the stuff of nightmares. They say if you're unlucky enough to wash ashore on its island, you will never, ever return alive. This is the story of two soldiers, Saito and Bronson, who found themselves trapped in that very hell. In the midst of World War II, they were on opposite sides, sworn enemies forced to fight for their countries. But on this island, the rules of war meant nothing. Here they faced a monster that didn't care about their flags or their allegiances. How could two enemies possibly fight together against such a creature? Could they even survive? Let's dive deep into their harrowing tale of survival. Our story begins in the dark, turbulent year of 1944, during the height of the Second World War. We're on a massive Japanese warship, a floating fortress slicing through the night ocean. The ship is packed with Japanese soldiers, but it also serves as a prison, its brig filled with captured enemies. However, among the prisoners, there's one who stands out, a Japanese soldier held captive by his own people. We see guards approach his cell, and the man they drag out is a mess. He's been beaten brutally, his body hanging limply as they cut him down from where he was strung up. From the guard's conversation, we learn his name is Saito. He was once one of them, a proud Japanese soldier, but he betrayed them. He committed an act of treason, and for that, he was now worse than a prisoner. He was a disgrace. That's why the torture he endured was far more severe than what any other captive faced. The guards haul him from the dark hold up to the deck of the ship. The cold night air hits him, and for a fleeting moment, as he looks at the vast, dark ocean, Saito considers jumping. A quick end, but before he can act, he's shoved violently into the captain's quarters, his head forced down in a bow before the ship's commanding officer. The commander circles him like a predator, spewing venomous words. He tells Saito he's unworthy of the soldier's locket around his neck, that his betrayal has stained their honor. The only fitting punishment is death, but they won't grant him an easy end here. No, they plan to take him back to his hometown in Japan and hang him publicly, turning him into a terrifying example for any who might consider defying the empire. Until they reach Japan, the commander warns him Saito's life is his to do with as he pleases. With a flick of his wrist, the commander signals two soldiers forward. They begin to strap something onto Saito, and at the same time, another prisoner is dragged in, a foreigner, an allied soldier. His name is Bronson. He doesn't know Saito, and Saito doesn't know him. Yet the guards take a heavy iron chain and shackle them together, ankle to ankle. The reason? The night before, Bronson had tried to escape, and it was Saito who had stopped his own soldiers from killing him on the spot. For this act of mercy toward an enemy, they were now bound together. Every movement Bronson makes yanks on Saito's leg, sending jolts of pain through him. But the Japanese soldiers just watch and laugh, savoring their cruelty. The commander is still berating Saito when suddenly the night sky erupts in chaos. The ship is under attack. Explosions tear through the vessel, sending shrapnel flying and rocking the massive ship violently. The Japanese soldiers are caught completely off guard, scrambling in the darkness. In the confusion with the ship literally breaking apart around them, Saito and Bronson see their chance. They begin to fight back against the guards, their shared chain making them an awkward but effective fighting unit. Though they are enemies from different worlds, in that moment, they become an unwilling team, taking down several soldiers together. Just then, the commander appears, his face a mask of rage. He levels his pistol, aiming directly at Saito, the traitor he despises most. He fires and a bullet tears into Saito's side, but before the commander can fire again, Bronson acts on pure instinct. He grabs the wounded Saito and leaps with him over the railing, plunging into the churning, dark ocean below. Seconds later, a torpedo strikes the ship, and the entire vessel explodes in a colossal fireball, vanishing into the sea in a blink of an eye. Because they had jumped just in time, they miraculously survived the blast. Saito passes out from his wounds almost immediately after hitting the water, and it's Bronson who has to drag his unconscious body and himself through the waves to the shore of a nearby island. Now, you might be thinking Bronson is a hero for saving Saito, but the truth was far more practical. He didn't save Saito out of kindness. He saved him because he had no choice. They were still chained together. To save himself, he had to save the enemy soldier shackled to him. Once on the beach, the exhausted Bronson collapses. The next morning, Saito awakens to the blinding sunlight. He has no idea where he is or how he got there. Then he looks over and sees Bronson, the man he's chained to, lying motionless beside him. Trying to figure out if Bronson is dead or alive, Saito scans his surroundings and spots the body of a dead Japanese soldier washed up nearby. With great effort, he drags himself closer, his hand stretching out to pull a pistol from the dead soldier's pocket. His plan is to shoot the shackle off his leg, but the loud click of the pistol's trigger awakens Bronson, who instantly assumes Saito is about to kill him. Without a second thought, Bronson lunges at Saito, tackling him to the sand and wrapping his hands around his throat, trying to choke the life out of him. Desperate, Saito grabs a heavy seashell and smashes it against Bronson's head. This misunderstanding explodes into a brutal, desperate fight between two powerful soldiers, each convinced the other is trying to kill him. As they grapple in the shallow water, neither of them notices that they are being watched. Something is lurking just beneath the surface, waiting, drawn by the scent of Saito's blood, clouding the water. If you think this is getting intense, hit that like button to let us know you're with us on this journey. Bronson finally gets the upper hand and is about to finish Saito off when the sea monster strikes. It bursts from the water, its massive jaws clamping down on Bronson, trying to drag him into the depths. The only thing that saves Bronson is the chain. The creature can't easily pull him away while he's still attached to Saito. In that critical moment, Saito grabs the pistol. For a split second, Bronson thinks Saito is going to finish the job the monster started. Instead, Saito aims past him and fires directly at the creature. The bullet hits its mark and the monster releases Bronson, who stumbles back, bleeding heavily from the bite wound on his stomach. He lets out a sigh of relief, realizing Saito just saved his life. But the trust isn't there yet. Saito still doesn't trust Bronson for a second. He keeps the gun aimed at him, forcing him back onto the shore. Their biggest problem now is the language barrier. Saito speaks no English, and Bronson speaks no Japanese, making any kind of communication nearly impossible. Bronson tries to ask Saito what that thing in the water was, if he'd seen it before, but Saito gives him nothing. Instead, Saito raises the gun, and Bronson thinks he's finally going to shoot the chain. But Saito's gaze falls upon the corpses of his fellow Japanese soldiers and the wreckage of his ship scattered across the beach. The full weight of his loss hits him, and his face falls. He doesn't shoot the chain. Instead, he stands up, presses the muzzle of the gun to his own throat, ready to end it all. Having lost all hope, he whispers a prayer and prepares to pull the trigger. But before he can, Bronson shoves him, knocking the gun from his hand. Bronson picks up the pistol, ejects the single bullet, and hands the bullet back to Saito. He then keeps the empty gun for himself. Through gestures, He makes his point clear. They have to fight the monster to survive, not each other. By separating the gun and the bullet, neither of them can kill the other. It's a fragile but powerful symbol of trust. To survive this island, they need each other. Saito accepts the terms, and the two men begin to explore the wreckage. Among the debris, Bronson finds a box containing a cleaver-like tool that might be able to break their chains. He also finds cigarettes and coffee, small comforts in this nightmare. Saito, however, remains withdrawn and silent, lost in his grief. Bronson's mood sours when he discovers the body of a very young Allied soldier he recognized, a boy who had been brutally tortured by the Japanese. He glares at Saito, his anger flaring up again. But Saito, instead of reacting with hostility, simply offers him a bottle of water. It's a small gesture, but it's enough. Saito was beginning to understand that Bronson wasn't his enemy here, and Bronson was starting to see the same. Still, trusting the enemy is a hard habit to break, especially when you can't even speak the same language. As day turns to night, they still haven't managed to break the chain. They build a fire on the edge of the dark, menacing jungle and cook crabs for dinner. Bronson struggles to take off his boot, his foot injured and swollen from his time as a prisoner. Seeing his struggle, Saito offers Bronson his own boots, but Bronson refuses. He will not wear the boots of a Japanese soldier. Saito understands. He had cooked 2 crabs and offers one to Bronson, who is so hungry. He tries to crack it open with his bare hands, only to drop it in the sand. He's about to eat the sandy crab, but Saito stops him and gives him his own portion instead. Seeing Bronson couldn't open it, Saito even cracks the shell for him. Bronson eats like a man starved, which he likely was, and a pang of sympathy crosses Saito's face. In that shared moment of humanity, Bronson points to himself and says his name. Saito returns the gesture, telling him his. They have finally officially introduced themselves. Bronson then tries to ask, through gestures, why Saito was chained with him, but Saito doesn't understand. Later that night, Bronson picks up the cleaver they found earlier and tries to smash the middle of the chain, but it's no use. Saito then points to the shackle right next to his own foot, indicating that's where he needs to strike. Bronson hesitates, his eyes wide with fear. He doesn't trust himself to make such a precise, dangerous strike without hitting Saito's leg. He asks Saito if he's sure, but Saito has complete faith. He extends his leg, silently telling him to do it. Bronson swings, but misses on the first try. Saito encourages him to try again. This time, Bronson swings with all his might, and the shackle breaks. Saito is free. A wave of relief washes over Bronson, but now it's his turn. He was afraid to swing the cleaver himself, so how can he possibly trust his enemy to do it? But Saito reassures him, and Bronson, closing his eyes and bracing for the worst, puts his trust in Saito. With one clean strike, Saito breaks the chain, and Bronson is free too. He can't believe it. He laughs, telling Saito that together they'd make a great team, at least for as long as they're on this island. But their moment of triumph is cut short. A deep, guttural moan echoes from the jungle bushes. The foliage begins to rustle violently, and birds scatter into the sky. They both know what it is. The sea monster has found them. They immediately go on high alert. Bronson grabs the gun while Saito takes the cleaver. They slowly advance into the jungle, where they find massive, monstrous footprints in the sand, but before they can track it, they hear human voices. 2 Japanese soldiers emerge onto the beach, dragging a prisoner with them. They're heavily armed. Bronson knows that if they find him, they will kill him on sight. He looks at Saito, his mind racing. Saito points to a dense thicket of bushes, signaling for Bronson to hide. He would handle his countrymen. Bronson is terrified. What if Saito betrays him and rejoins his own side? But he has no choice. He has to trust him. Saito even hands him the cleaver before Bronson disappears into the darkness. The two soldiers are about to move on when they smell the cooked crab. They follow the scent and find Saito pretending to be asleep. They shake him awake, and he quickly tells them not to shoot. Seeing his uniform, they realize he was on the same ship they were. They explain that they survived the explosion by wearing life jackets. The three of them start gathering the supplies Saito and Bronson had collected from his hiding place. Bronson watches everything, his heart pounding. Suddenly, he hears a low growl right behind him. He turns and sees the sea monster standing there in the shadows, watching him. He freezes in terror, not daring to make a sound. When he dares to look again, the creature is gone. Meanwhile, the prisoner with the Japanese soldiers finds the water canteen, but the soldiers snatch it from him, drinking it all themselves without offering him a single drop. One of the soldiers becomes suspicious. He notices Bronson's jacket among the supplies and asks Saito if he's alone. Saito lies, saying he is, but his lie only deepens their suspicion. They remember hearing about a traitor on the ship who helped an enemy soldier, and then they see it, the broken piece of the shackle still on Saito's ankle. They knew the traitor was supposed to be put in chains. Their voices turn menacing as they demand to know where the enemy soldier is. Saito points to one of the dead bodies on the beach, claiming he's dead, but they don't buy it for a second. Just as they're about to force the truth out of him, that terrifying roar echoes from the jungle again. This time, the prisoner starts crying, repeating a name over and over. Orang Ikan. The man is paralyzed with fear, but the two soldiers are dismissive. One of them heads towards the sound to investigate. He gets dangerously close to where Bronson is hiding. Bronson accidentally makes a slight noise, and the soldier starts moving toward him. He's about to be discovered when another sound comes from a different direction, near a cave entrance. The soldier, now distracted, heads towards the cave instead. He thinks maybe Saito's hidden partner is in there. He steps inside, completely unaware he's walking into the monster's lair. As this is happening, Bronson is slowly trying to sneak up behind the other soldier, who still has his gun trained on Saito. Inside the cave, the monster ambushes the first soldier, slicing his hand off with one swift swipe before he can even raise his rifle. His screams echo out of the cave. The remaining soldier turns to attack Saito, but just then, Bronson bursts from the bushes, taking him down and saving Saito's life. A moment later, the monster throws the severed head of the first soldier out of the cave. Saito and Bronson stare in horror as the terrifying creature emerges from the darkness. The soldier Bronson had attacked is still alive, but not for long. The monster descends upon him, shoves its hand deep into his chest, and rips out his still-beating heart. This scene is absolutely horrifying, and if you're as shocked as we are, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. The prisoner sees this gruesome display and makes a run for it. The monster drops the heart and gives chase, catching him with ease and killing him just as brutally. Saito and Bronson don't wait to see more. They turn and run for their lives, the monster hot on their heels. Saito uses the cleaver to slash through the thick jungle vines as they flee. Bronson keeps looking back and starts to fall behind. He stumbles and falls hard. The monster is right on top of him. He has a gun and fires at it, but the bullets have no effect. The monster raises its claws to strike the final blow, but Saito doubles back and attacks the creature, giving Bronson just enough time to get up and escape. They run until they reach a steep, muddy slope. They lose their footing and tumble violently down, crashing through the undergrowth. Bronson hits his head hard, and both men are knocked unconscious by the fall. The next morning, Bronson wakes up spitting blood. Saito is in bad shape too, with a large wooden splinter embedded in his chest, which he painfully pulls out. But Bronson is in a much more dangerous situation. He finds himself lying on a tree branch hanging precariously over a cliff, with a massive waterfall roaring below him. He tries to steady himself, but he slips and falls, hitting a rock ledge before plunging into the raging river. The current is too strong, and it sweeps him away. Meanwhile, Saito, exploring a nearby stream, finds a sharp, discarded sword which he takes for protection. Both men are now separated, injured, and lost, trying to navigate the treacherous terrain alone while avoiding the monster. Bronson is eventually swept to a calmer part of the river, but as he pulls himself onto the rocks, he slips again, crying out in pain. From high above on the cliffs overlooking the waterfall, the sea monster hears his cry and lets out a terrifying roar. Saito hears it too and worries for Bronson. Bronson finally makes it to the riverbank, thinking he's safe for a moment, but then he sees it, a massive crocodile lying dormant just feet away. He freezes, not daring to breathe, as the crocodile slowly slides into the water and swims away. Once it's gone, Bronson scrambles into the jungle. He eventually comes to a clearing at the base of the large waterfall and sees the sea monster. It's tending to a wound on its arm, applying some kind of plant matter like a salve. Bronson hides, his heart pounding in his chest as he watches death itself just a stone's throw away. He accidentally makes a noise, and the monster's head snaps up, its eyes scanning the area. Just then, something massive moves in the water below. The crocodile from before launches itself at the sea monster, dragging it under the surface. Bronson is stunned. Could there be something on this island even more dangerous than the Orang Ikan? Bloody water begins to bubble to the surface. Bronson waits, wondering what will emerge. A moment later, the monster bursts from the water, holding the massive crocodile, which it has torn into two halves. Its victorious roar echoes through the valley, and Saito, who is further downriver, hears it and quickly gets out of the water, retreating into the jungle. Bronson realizes he needs to get out of there, and fast. As Saito moves through the dense jungle, he makes a gruesome discovery: the body of a soldier hanging from a tree. Startled, he stumbles backward and falls into a deep pit. It's a trap, one meant not for humans but for the monster. At the bottom of the pit lies the corpse of another creature, a male Orang Ikan. This must have been the monster's mate. Once Saito realizes it's dead, he calms down and climbs out of the pit, and he notices the dead soldier in the tree is still clutching a gun with several bullets in it and a photo of a woman. He takes the gun, knowing he'll need it. Now armed with a sword and a pistol, he continues on, eventually reaching the large pool at the bottom of the waterfall. In the water, he sees the wreckage of a crashed airplane. As he investigates, he sees something that makes him freeze. By now, evening is falling, and Bronson is making his way through the darkening jungle, worried about Saito. He eventually arrives at the same waterfall and sees the plane wreckage. He has no weapons, so he fashions a makeshift spear from a piece of the plane. He wades out to the cockpit and finds a box of supplies, including a flashlight and a Zippo lighter. He sits in the wreckage, shivering, and lights a cigarette. Suddenly, he hears a splash in the water. He spins around, thinking It's the monster, but it's Saito. Saito urgently gestures for him to follow. Saito leads him to a cave hidden behind the waterfall. Inside, they find something truly horrifying. The cave is filled with spiderweb-like sacs, and inside, each one is a monster's egg, pulsating, ready to hatch. This is the monster's nest. Bronson immediately wants to destroy them all, but Saito stops him. He manages to explain that this is a mother monster. Her mate is the one he found dead in the pit trap. If they harm her children, her rage will be unimaginable, but Bronson has an idea. He says, either it lives or we do. He takes Saito back to the plane wreckage, pointing to something he'd noticed earlier, a missile still attached to the wing. His plan is to use the missile to destroy the monster and her nest all at once. They manage to haul the heavy missile back into the cave. But there's a problem. The tip of the missile is bent, and they need to strike it perfectly to detonate it. Bronson explains through gestures that for this plan to work, one of them will have to stay behind and make the ultimate sacrifice. They'll need to lure the monster into the cave and then shoot the missile at the exact right moment. After hearing the plan, Saito immediately volunteers. He had already accepted death once before and was ready to give his life. But first, they need a heavy tool from the plane's cockpit to straighten the missile's tip. Before they head out, Bronson finds a flare gun in the wreckage and fires it into the sky, a desperate signal for rescue. He then climbs into the cockpit to retrieve the tool, while Saito stands guard outside. But the flare has an unintended consequence. It immediately attracts the monster. The creature bursts from the jungle, and Saito is forced to fight it alone, trying to buy Bronson enough time. It's a desperate, brutal battle. Meanwhile, the tool is jammed in the cockpit. Bronson finally wrenches it free and joins the fight, and together they manage to inflict enough damage on the monster to make it retreat. They rush back into the cave, and Bronson frantically works on straightening the missile's tip. Saito guards the entrance, but they made a fatal mistake. The monster was already inside. It ambushes them from the shadows, attacking Bronson and trying to tear his heart out just as it had done to the soldier. But before it can, Saito stabs it with his sword. The monster shrieks and kicks him across the cave before turning its attention back to Bronson, its claws digging into his chest. Seeing his friend about to die, Saito raises his pistol and shoots the monster directly in the eye. The creature recoils in pain, releasing Bronson, but it's still alive and enraged. Saito fires again, but the bullets just won't stop it. So, in a final, desperate act, Saito aims his gun at one of the eggs and fires. The egg explodes, and the lifeless body of the baby monster slumps to the ground. The mother monster lets out a soul-shattering scream of grief and rage. It completely forgets about the humans and rushes to its dead child. In that moment of distraction, Saito goes to Bronson, telling him they have to get out of there. The monster's rage will now be beyond anything they've faced. But Bronson knows he's not going to make it. His wounds are too severe. He takes off his dog tags and presses them into Saito's hand. He explains that a rescue team will come because of the flare, and the dog tags will make them see Saito as a friend, not an enemy. He tells Saito to run. Saito refuses to leave him, but Bronson insists he's not going to survive anyway. The monster's heartbroken cries turn into roars of pure fury. Saito knows he has no choice. He leaves his friend behind. Bronson grabs a weapon and waits. The monster, blinded by rage, charges at him. Bronson swings the tool with all his might and strikes the tip of the missile. The first hit does nothing. Then he remembers what Saito told him when they were breaking the chains. Strike with full confidence. He summons his remaining strength and strikes again. A perfect, powerful blow. The missile activates. As the monster lunges, the cave is consumed by a massive explosion. From a safe distance, Saito sees the blast and believes it's finally over. Bronson and the monster are gone, but he is wrong. He soon realizes his mistake when he hears an all-too-familiar roar echoing from the wreckage of the cave. The monster survived, badly burned and wounded, but alive, and now it wants revenge. Saito doesn't hesitate. He runs, sprinting through the jungle, with the enraged monster crashing through the trees behind him. He finally reaches the beach, but there's no sign of a rescue party. He's trapped. As the monster closes in, he falls to his knees, seemingly accepting his fate. The creature sees the kneeling figure and attacks, tearing it apart. But it's not Saito, it's the body of another dead soldier that Saito had propped up as a decoy. Saito bursts out from his hiding place under the sand and ambushes the monster, stabbing it with his sword. The monster fights back, its claws slashing Saito, but he presses the attack, screaming as he drives the sword into the creature again and again. The monster, already weakened from the explosion, finally collapses onto the sand. Saito stands over it, ready to deliver the killing blow, but as he looks down at the creature, he sees not a monster, but a grieving mother whimpering in pain. His anger fades, replaced by an unexpected wave of pity. He can't do it. He lowers his sword and drives it into the sand beside the creature. The monster looks at him, seemingly surprised by this act of mercy, before it slowly drags itself away, disappearing back into the jungle. Saito, exhausted and bleeding, makes his way to the water's edge. He finds the flare gun, but realizes it has no more flares. He can't signal for help. The pain and blood loss finally overwhelm him, and he collapses, clutching Bronson's dog tags as he loses consciousness. The next morning, smoke from the explosion leads a rescue team to the island, where they find Saito unconscious on the beach. Days later, he is recovering in a military hospital. He's physically better, but remains silent. Since he doesn't speak English, they bring in a translator to question him. An officer asks him how he got Bronson's dog tags and why a man in a Japanese uniform has the shackle of a prisoner on his ankle. For the first time, Saito speaks. He tells them he killed his commanding officer on the ship when he was ordered to execute Bronson and other prisoners. The officer is stunned and asks how he knew Bronson. Saito's mind floods with memories of the man who started as his enemy but became his friend on that cursed island. He accepts a cigarette from the officer, smoking for the first time, and with a newfound strength, he looks them in the eye and says, "Bronson was my friend." Two enemies had become brothers, unexpectedly and unspokenly. The officer asks him one final question. Was there anyone or anything else on that island? Saito thinks of the monster, the grieving mother he had spared. He knows that if he tells them the truth, they will send teams to hunt it, and either more men will die, or the creature will become a victim of scientific experiments. So, to protect both his own kind and the monsters, he lies. He says there was nothing else. With that, he is cleared and sent back to his hometown. The final shot of our story shows us the island where, deep in the jungle, the mother Orang Ikan lives on alone, and that's where their incredible story ends. What did you think of Saito's final decision? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this recap, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories like this one.